From KGW News, this is Straight Talk with Laural Porter.
Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Laural Porter. It is Labor Day weekend, signaling the last few weeks of summer. It also means the political season will begin to ramp up as we look toward the 2024 election. One of those important races will be for district attorney in Multnomah County. The current DA is Mike Schmidt. He was elected in a lopsided victory in 2020 during racial justice protests. Campaigning as a reformer of the criminal justice system, Schmidt won with 77% of the vote. But he's faced strong criticism during his first term from those who feel his progressive policies have led to rising violence and crime. So far, Schmidt faces one opponent, a career prosecutor, Nathan Vasquez, who's a senior deputy DA in Schmidt's office. In this episode of Straight Talk, we hear from DA Schmidt on why he's running for re-election and why he thinks he deserves a second term. What he feels he's accomplished. Has he delivered on his promises for reform? And is he to blame for rising crime? We'll ask those questions and more. Welcome to my guest, Multnomah County District Attorney Mike Schmidt. Welcome to Straight Talk. It's great to have you here.
Hey, good to see you again, Laural.
You and I were talking about, I think the last time you were on was virtual, so we're just meeting in person for the first time.
I know, it's great to actually be here in person.
What would you say about the last 3 years in office? Describe them for me. What was it like for you? Is it what you expected when you were elected in 2020?
Well, I don't know if anybody could have expected what these last 3 years has brought. Like you said at the outset, I was elected on a major reform platform and overwhelmingly won the vote. So I've been working on the issues that I ran on, but we've had, of course, a number of challenges, starting with the pandemic and a public defense crisis, and then on and on and on. So it's been challenging. Didn't expect some of these things, but we're continuing to do the work and we're making some good impacts. As you know, you've experienced some harsh criticism. There's been billboards downtown with a unflattering play on your last name. Portland is a Schmidt show. I know you've seen that. It's a good picture. Another roving vehicle I've seen downtown with the same message, a barrage of television ads critical of you. How hard has that been on you and your family? Well, I think the hard part about it is that it really kind of misidentifies a lot of our challenges. And so, you know, dealing with the real things that have to work, our entire system has to work together, from law enforcement to jail to prosecutor's office. And when things aren't working, it's really challenging. But no silver bullet or billboard has the prescription for what ails us. So the hard part is working through the misinformation and working with community members to let them know where the real issues are and how we can navigate those. You've got to have a really thick skin for the job you're doing and enduring the criticism. Why do you want to run for re-election? Well, when I ran in the first place, it was because I knew that we could do things better. And by that, I mean do things to make us more safe as a community. I ran the Criminal Justice Commission before I became the district attorney. And so I've been into data and research. I've gotten to travel the world. I went to Norway. We all have heard over and over again that the United States is the most incarcerated nation in the world. We're not the safest. We know that it can be done in smarter ways. And so my focus has been on smart reforms that I think bring together the reforms that will make us more safe by doing them. What do you think your greatest achievement has been in trying to reach those goals? You know, we've created a number of programs, the things that I'm proud of. We started a new treatment court that I'm very proud of. The recidivism rate of that treatment court is 10%. Recidivism, of course, meaning committing a new crime within 3 years. The same folks, when they get sent to prison, their recidivism rate is 50%. Very proud of that work. It's called the STEP Court. I'm proud of our Justice Integrity Unit that works on getting old convictions right. You may have seen news about the Department of Motor Vehicles and a bunch of wrongful convictions from across the state. It was my office that uncovered that. And now we're talking about tens, if not dozens, of people who have been wrongfully convicted, and we're correcting that. I've got prosecutors now back into communities. One of the first things when I was the district attorney, I met with other DAs from around the country, and they said, Multnomah County, you guys are leaders in neighborhood prosecution. How's that going? And I said, that program was cut years ago. I said, how can that be? Since then, we built it back. Working with the county commission, I now have 4 prosecutors in neighborhoods so that they can work directly with community members to work on the issues that will make them feel more safe. And I'm going to dig into a few of those programs in just a moment, but I want to ask you about a public opinion poll that was done by People for Portland, and they're the people behind the billboards and the TV ads. The survey asked whether policies and actions from you are doing a good job or a bad job of ensuring public safety in Multnomah County. And the poll said 57% said you're doing a bad job, and 11% said a good job. The rest were unsure. Why do you think the public perception of your job performance is so low? Well, first of all, I think you got to look at who's asking the questions. The People for Portland group is a dark money group that is spending a lot of money putting up billboards and running negative ads, as you've already laid out. So they're also trying to drive perception with their polls. And these are the same folks that told us through their polling that Betsy Johnson would be our governor today. So I'm not entirely worried that what their polls say is true. But I do think that there is a sense in our community, and I talk with community members all the time, people from Portland, not just the people for Portland, about what their issues are. And there is feelings of unsafety, and I think we have to address that. That's why I'm working on things like auto theft with our new auto theft task force, retail theft, obviously homicides and gun violence. I'm focusing on the issues that I think are driving a lot of members of our community not to feel safe.
You got to admit, though, you've got a perception problem. A lot of people don't feel like you're prosecuting enough. They feel like your office lets people off the hook, back out on the street. A lot of Portland police officers feel like they arrest someone only to turn around and see your office release them. And a lot of that perception stems from when you were first elected during the racial justice protests, and you dropped misdemeanor and felony charges against more than 500 demonstrators. Do you regret that?
I don't regret that. I mean, you have to remember, I came in on the 60th day of the protests. So my first day, the former district attorney resigned, the chief of police resigned, and I started on August 1st, day 60, right after the Trump administration had sent federal people to our streets to do all kinds of things using munitions. And we've just seen report after report about the violence and the gas and other things being used by Portland police and also by the federal troops who were sent here. So it was a very challenging time. I came out with a policy that said, look, if you're damaging windows, if you're destroying property, you're lighting things on fire, we're going to prosecute you. If you're just in the streets and you're just demonstrating to say that our system is not getting it right, those aren't cases that we're going to use our resources on. I think it was the right policy. The challenge has been the messaging afterwards about how, I mean, Donald Trump was talking about me in speeches, you know, and that messaging, I think, broke through that, oh, that means we're not prosecuting anything. Not true. Our prosecution rates in our office are now higher than what my predecessors were. So we're doing the work. There's information out there.
So you think you're prosecuting enough?
Oh, I do. And I think what a lot of folks maybe don't understand, and it's a system, it's a complex system. I can only prosecute cases where police officers make an arrest and have evidence. So we get those cases from them. They're kind of the pitchers. We're the catchers. We take those cases. And what I track is the percentage of the cases they're sending us. What percentage are we prosecuting? And that number has been going up consistently since I started. And now we're at a higher point than when my predecessor held this office. So the way you get there is not by accident. It's by hard work. And it's actually by collaboration with law enforcement partners, helping them on building better cases, gathering evidence, and then my prosecutors take it from there.
You have a dashboard on your website if people want to take a look at the dashboard to see the number of prosecutions. But a lot of people, including Portland Police's rank and file, say it's just a distraction, that it is taking away the focus for what's not happening, that Portland police are understaffed, they're not able to respond to a lot of cases, and as I said before, they feel like they arrest somebody, your office in turn lets them go. Do you think you have the support of the rank and file, the Portland Police Bureau?
I go out with Portland Police. I do ride-alongs. I went with the behavioral health unit. I've gone with the FIT team, which is the focus intervention team that works on gun violence. I've attended the academy, the Citizens Academy. I meet with the chief on a regular basis. Like I talked about, these two new task forces that we've got, the retail theft and auto theft, which are getting really great results even early on, are showing that collaboration. So I think it's growing. You know, I started at a tough point. I started at a tough spot in the protests. But we're working together and we're getting good results. So you think that you can get more support from the rank and file, the Portland Police Bureau? I think that what people see is eventually, if they are actually being open and honest, they're seeing that we're prosecuting the cases, again, at a higher percentage than my predecessor. So the cases are coming through. One of the things that you mentioned and that people talk about is cases getting released. Well, it is a complex system. There are judges involved, there are jails involved, there are public defenders, of which there are not enough. So I think when people actually start to pull apart the threads of some of this misinformation that they're hearing, they see what's actually happening, which is a system system that has a lot of challenges.
Well, let's talk about the public defenders, because that is a big problem. Recently, in an unprecedented move, a federal judge ordered defendants in Washington County that have been held for 10 days or more without representation to be released, and they included those charged with rape, child abuse, home invasion, domestic violence. Now, this was just Washington County, but it really has implications for the whole state. Our Kylie Boshi did an investigative report on the lack of public defenders, and he found there are about 170 defendants throughout the state that don't have representation. And the legislature has poured millions of dollars into this, trying to ease the crisis, but it's just not enough. What do you think, DA, that should be done to fix the public defender system?
Well, like you said, it's a crisis. I've been talking about this, unfortunately, now for well over a year. I went down and worked on the legislative committee that oversaw the legislation that eventually got passed. That's a good start. I mean, more funding. We need more defense attorneys. We need to maintain the ones who are currently doing the work by making sure that their salary is competitive and we're incentivizing them to stay in the profession. Those are good first steps. But we need to look critically about what are the caseloads that folks can take, how can they give that representation. And this is impacting not just, as you say, Washington County, Multnomah County. It's happening across our state right now. And 170 or so in jail, probably over 1,000 cases that have not had defense attorneys appointed with people out of custody. And that's bad for victims of crime. The famous saying by MLK, Martin Luther King, right, is justice delayed is justice denied. For victims who their cases are dismissed today, that's justice delayed and maybe potentially denied if that case ends up going away permanently. We bring those cases back for prosecution, but that's bad for victims, it's bad for accountability, it's bad for public safety. So this truly is a crisis. I want to see those dollars roll out. I want to see more public defenders in those positions to take those cases, and hopefully that will abate.
One of the things that leads people to feel unsafe in downtown Portland and that there is a crime wave is what they see happening with drugs. And you were a supporter of Measure 110, which decriminalized possession of low levels of hard drugs like fentanyl, like heroin. And then in turn, money was supposed to be poured into treatment. What the public has seen instead is a free-for-all, they feel like, downtown with open drug use, a crisis of overdoses, a lack of consequences for those who refuse treatment. A lot of people are saying it's an unmitigated disaster, Measure 110. Do you still support Measure 110?
So I supported Measure 110, I think like 60% of Oregonians that voted for that measure, because ultimately I believe that addiction is a health issue. It should be treated in the health system. When I go talk to community members, I do this thing where I say, hey, raise your hand if you know somebody who's been affected by addiction. And every hand goes up. Almost everybody in their life knows somebody. And I say, picture that person in your mind. Now keep your hand up if you think what they needed was to go to jail or prison for that addiction. And the hands go back down. When we talk about how this affects us personally, I think people get it, they understand, and that's why Oregonians decided to give this a try. I think there are things that we could improve upon Measure 110, and I think we need to be looking at that openly and honestly. Obviously, the money hitting our streets was too slow. The rollout was too slow. I'm happy that I was just at, a week ago, a ribbon cutting for a fentanyl detox facility in Multnomah County, first of its kind, funded by Measure 110 dollars. I was at another one not too previous to that. So I'm starting to see voters wanted it 2 years ago, as did I. And so I think one is we got to see the investment start to go out. But prior to 110, Oregon ranked like 49th in the country for access to those treatment services. We got to fix that. That's a big part of it. On the second half, on the open use on the streets, I agree. It makes people feel unsafe. It leads to feelings of disorder, and in fact, sometimes is actually making people less safe. I live in this community. I've got a family. I don't like it as much as anybody else. I think that's something that I'm talking with legislators and others about. What can we do about open use on our streets and making sure that we're getting folks into treatment. Going back to criminalization is not going to fix the problem unless there's a connection to treatment. And we have people in drug courts right now that are still waiting 60, 90, 120 days to get into treatment. We got to fix that if this is going to work.
Now, there's a new poll out from Emerson College that says that 56% of people polled want to repeal Measure 110. 64% want to return to criminal consequences. Would you support mandatory drug treatment?
I think that again, when you talk to people about how you phrase those questions, it can change when they start thinking about getting people treatment. But I do think that there are folks, especially if they're committing crimes, that absolutely they should be mandated to go into treatment. We're doing that now. Potentially that could be expanded. But what I also am seeing is I'm seeing people that want treatment right now not being mandated, and they're being told to go line up and wait lists and being turned away from doors. We know from the data and research that people who voluntarily go into treatment have much better outcomes for long-term success than people who are mandated in it. So we got to get those folks in there first, because that's preventative. You know, a lot of what I do in the district attorney's office and the criminal system, we're reactive. We're after the fact. We got to get the prevention side of things going.
You've endured some harsh criticism for not reviewing the early prison release commutations made by former Governor Kate Brown, which included that of Jesse Calhoun, who's been linked to the murders of 4 different women. Do you regret that you didn't review Calhoun's case?
So what happened? I take clemency petitions incredibly seriously. I have an incredibly robust process about what we do. We look, of course, at the application. We look at the person's history within the institution in the Department of Corrections and look at whether or not they've had violations. We talk to the victim or family members and see what it is that their opinions are and what they feel about it. We talk to sometimes the former detectives or prosecutors. It's an exhaustive process that we go through in commutations.
But did you review Jesse Calhoun's case?
So what happened in the vast majority of commutations, I ended up supporting less than half of those. Jesse Calhoun's was different. He was on a list of people who were singled out for being firefighters during the 2020 thing. They had less than a year on their sentence, and the governor asked us, if you object, let us know within 7 days. There was no way for us to work through our exhaustive process, so I wasn't going to rubber stamp.
But other counties did take time to review cases and raise objections.
Other counties objected. That doesn't mean that they took time to thoughtfully consider it. We're talking about, in this specific case, an individual who was in for a stolen car case and had less than 11 months to go.
But in hindsight, would you make a different choice?
I mean, knowing everything, if I had, a crystal ball into the future, would I make a different choice? Of course, I'd make a different choice in terms of what I would do. But at the time, with what we knew, I wasn't going to rubber stamp a decision if I wasn't going to be able to thoughtfully vet it.
Well, in light of what happened, will you review your support of any other commuted criminals from Multnomah County?
We've been going through everything that we supported, and again, like I said, out of all the ones that were submitted to my office, I ended up supporting less than half of the commutations sent to me. But of the ones that I supported, we're going back and checking and saying, hey, are they involved in criminal activity? And if they are, then we're looking at whether or not we should ask the governor to revoke those.
Well, there's so much more to talk about with DA Schmidt. We're going to take a break right now, but we'll continue our conversation right after the break. Welcome back to Straight Talk. I'm Laural Porter. We're talking with Multnomah County District Attorney Mike Schmidt. He was first elected in 2020 with 77% of the vote. And after a tough 3 years in office, he's announced he's running for a second term. Welcome back to my guest, District Attorney Mike Schmidt. Once again, great to have you here.
Thanks, Laural.
You have one opponent. Your sole opponent right now is Nathan Vasquez, a senior deputy DA in your office. You are his boss. What is that working relationship like when you're running against each other?
Well, we have a job to do, and I have a job to do managing a 250-person law firm. So it's a professional relationship. But, Nathan's one of the mid-level managers in my office. We have to work together. But I'm focused on the issues that Multnomah County really needs to focus on, which is gun violence and property crimes, things like that.
There are people who say that you are too radical to find that balance between criminal justice reform and ensuring public safety. How do you respond to that criticism?
Well, I think it's a misunderstanding because criminal justice reform and public safety actually are hand in glove. We've been doing things a certain way for decades in this country. We're the most incarcerated nation on earth. We're not the safest. It's clear that that doesn't work. So the real question is, what do we have to change to get better results? That's why we have things like our treatment courts that are getting better recidivism results. We have other things like our auto theft task force or our neighborhood community prosecutors who are out there asking community members, what do you need? How can we work on these things? These are criminal justice reform ideas. And so we're working on those and making our community more safe.
You talked about the STEP court, which is for Measure 11 offenders facing Measure 11 crimes, not including homicide or sexual assault, domestic violence, kidnapping, that sort of thing. And it pairs mental health and drug treatment with that. A lot of people say that you're letting Measure 11 offenders off the hook for punishments that were approved by Oregon voters and sending a message to would-be bad actors in Multnomah County. They may not face tough mandatory sentencing.
Well, so we screen every case individually and on its merits. So what we're looking at when we take cases is what is a person's criminal history. We're making sure that the people that we're giving this opportunity to we're not risking the community's safety by doing it. We targeted assaults and robberies because in Multnomah County, 25% of the people we were sending to prison for those crimes were young black men. Now, you and I both know that 25% of Multnomah County's population is not young black men. That's wildly disparate. So we were feeding into the disparity in our prison system. Step court, a year and a half in, 70 participants, 10% recidivism rate. People who go to prison, the folks who would go to prison, 50% recidivism rate. So we are proving that we can keep people in the community, we can work on the issues that got them there in the first place, and we can get better public safety results while saving taxpayers money. Building more prisons, you might as well start building less schools, right? What is the trade-offs that we have to make these decisions? Can we keep our community even more safe with less cost and better outcomes? I think any voter would go for that.
Well, as we've been talking about, you ran on a criminal justice reform platform, as did San Francisco's former DA, Chesa Boudin. San Francisco experienced a highly publicized crime wave, and there was a recall effort against Boudin. And as he was trying to hold on to his job, you asked your supporters in an email to help him out. And you said, they're coming after Chesa, and now they're coming after me. Boudin was eventually recalled. What does that say that you supported a DA that was recalled by his own voters?
Well, first of all, there are differences in California and Oregon recall laws, so I think things in California are pretty tough. But the reason I supported Chase is the same reasons that I ran, and I support other district attorneys across the country that are willing to have hard conversations with their communities. Look, we've lived in a society, in a community that for decades has been drumming this mantra of tough on crime, lock them up. And we're trying to say, hey, we can get better public safety results by doing something different. And actually, reformers across the country keep getting reelected over and over again. Larry Krasner in Philadelphia is one of the popular ones. Kim Fox in Chicago, Alvin Bragg in Manhattan. If you add all of us up and the people that we represent as elected district attorneys, we represent over 20% of this country's population. And we keep winning these races. Chase's race was a little bit of an outlier, but I'm going to support anybody who's trying to do the right things for the right reasons and get better public safety results for their community.
Let's talk about your office. There have been allegations you've engaged in gender discrimination and retaliation when deciding promotions in your office. And BOLI, the Oregon Bureau of Labor and Industries, conducted an investigation and found evidence to substantiate that. BOLI said between August of 2020 and January of 2022, you promoted 5 men to senior deputy district attorney positions and only 1 woman. And overall, only about 20% of women in your office compared to 80% of men hold leadership positions. And BOLI found you retaliated against an employee connected to some of those complaints. How do you respond to that report?
Well, BOLI got a bunch of things wrong. This was also investigated by an outside independent law firm, Barron Lehman, who looked at this. They were paid for by the county to investigate this. They did exhaustive interviews, I think around 40 or so witnesses that they interviewed, and they came out to the exact opposite conclusion that BOLI did. Also, there's some things that are being glossed over there. Some of the men that I promoted to senior positions are the first black male chief prosecutor in this county's history, the highest ranking ever black male. When I ran to do this work, I talked to community members about diversifying the office. Gender diversity is absolutely one part, but also racial and ethnic diversity is very important. So now I have both running my operations side, the highest ranking ever black female in district attorney's history in Multnomah County, highest ranking black male. So I'm looking at a lot of things, and also who's the right person for the job at the time. These positions and promotions are not fungible. Different people have different skill sets that fit specific roles. So I disagree respectfully with the BOLI finding, and I think you look at the Barron Lehman report and you can see why.
I want to give you about 45 seconds for a final pitch to voters. Why should they re-elect you?
Well, we've really just gotten started on the work that I began to do when I first got elected and made the pitch to voters that we can make this community more safe by doing reform issues. We've got a restorative justice program. We had a higher profile case with a police officer and a protester. We proved that they can work out their differences and come together and heal. That makes us better as a community. We're working on our different auto theft task force. Stolen cars down 20% this year. Catalytic converter theft, we got the law changed, down 40% in 2023 from where it was. We are prioritizing things that are making this community more safe, and we need more time. We've been doing it the same way for decades. It's time to try doing it in the reform way.
District Attorney Mike Schmidt, thank you for joining us here on Straight Talk. And there's so much more to talk about. The DA has agreed to stay for a bonus edition. You can find that on KGW's YouTube channel or KGW Plus on Roku. Join me next week when my guest is Portland City Commissioner Mingus Mapps, who's announced he's running for Portland Mayor in 2024. We'll see you next week for Straight Talk. Have a great week.